recording oral history interview of Richard Acker, 714th Tank Battalion, 12th Armored Division, Second World War. Interview taking place at Indianapolis, Indiana, 64th Reunion, August 7, 2010. First, Mr. Acker, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit down with me and tell me your story.
Thank you.
And as you probably have heard me going along here, we start off with your early life before you joined the Army. What were you doing?
What was I doing? I graduated from high school in 1940. And I had started a dance band when I was a sophomore in high school. And we were good enough that we thought we could go out on the road and become, and this was an 18-piece band like Miller and Dorsey and all those fellas, and we were going to see if we could join the circuit and be well known, because we were all well known in Indiana and southern Michigan. Played all over there. And that was 1942. We had all things planned, had been fitted for our pants and sport jackets and everything. The Jap bound Pearl Harbor, that ended everything. Because I started losing fellas to the service. So in September of 42, I was discussing, and I said, I'm going to join the Army, Dad. I was going to be drafted anyway. I was 20 years old. And so I tried to get in the Air Force first. I passed all my examinations and everything, come to that damn colorblind book, and they had to wash me out. I couldn't see the numbers in there. So I tried to get in the Navy. They washed me out because they use colored lights, see. So I said, well, the Army will still take me. I'm still warm, so they'll take me. So I went and joined the Army. And again, I was only 20 years old, so my dad had to sign for me, see, because I volunteered. And they shipped me down to Indianapolis here, to Fort Benjamin Harrison. And that's where I was inducted into the service. Well, my brother-in-law was a doctor and stationed here at the time. And I didn't know where I was going. They hadn't sent any replacements out or anything. So I was having dinner with him one night, and I said, Paul, his name was Paul Feldman, Dr. Feldman. He said, I said, Paul, they're looking for paratroopers. And I said, that sounds like it's pretty good. I said, boy, the uniforms are great. And I said, and they get extra pay for jumping and all that. He says, you join that outfit and I'll break your neck. He says, because he said, you realize what those guys do? They jump behind the lines and wait for the other guys to catch up to them. So I didn't join that. So all of a sudden one day they called us and they said, you're being shipped out this afternoon. Didn't tell us where we were going. Got loaded us on a train. When we wound up down at Fort Campbell, known as Camp Campbell then. We were the first troops in that. It was a brand new camp. And when they got on the train, they said, you are now property of the 12th Armored Division. And so we were unloaded from the train, and we were put in barracks for the night. Next morning we went down to the gymnasium where they were replacing you in different units. So I wound up in the 44th Armored Regiment. And I said to this sergeant, he says, hey, you had a band, you want to be in the band? I said, no, I don't want in the band. I said, I saw that tank out in front. I said, all that steel wrapped around me, they're shooting at me. I said, that's pretty good. He says, young man, he says, you sure you want that? He says, I said, yeah, I want that steel wrapped around me. I said, that's a precaution. I don't have to worry about that. He said, are you sure you want that? And I said, yes, I'd want to be in a tanker. He stamped the thing. He said, your funeral, get the hell out of here.
I think that was before you'd heard the term rolling steel coffin.
That's right. I hadn't heard that, see? And I found out what they were talking about with coffins later on. But anyway, I joined the 12th when it was formed. So I was the 12th all through my Army career except at the end. But I joined Fort Campbell, went on Tennessee maneuvers in 43, tore up Tennessee's roads, and got into their white lightning down there. And the stills we run over in the mountains and everything. And I can tell you a few stories about that if you want. Well, we were sitting around the camp, the fire one night, and we had that white lightning. We were cutting it with grapefruit juice. And Harold Wiedemann was one of the fellows there, and there was Sergeant White and all those guys. And Harold Wiedemann, he drank so much of it, he fell off his chair. And he crawled on his hands and knees back to his tent. And he says, "I'm a bad boy. I'm a bad boy." The next morning, his head was about, he didn't even want to look at it. So that was part of our Tennessee maneuvers, because we even got lost in the mountains down there. Well, I got to tell you something else about Tennessee maneuvers. We had a night maneuver, and I said to the lieutenant, I says, "Look at these coordinates, you know where we're at?" She says, "No." I said, "Downtown Nashville." I says, "You see, you're kidding, Ack." I said, "No, I'm not. Downtown Nashville." And I got one on the maneuver. We were downtown Nashville, and the Nashville police were so damn mad at us. I mean, we had tanks, trucks, jeeps, half tracks all down there. We tied up traffic real good. So then they didn't put us near Nashville anymore. We were out in the other, where they make the one what's that car that the GM makes? We captured that town I don't know how many times. We chased the Germans all out of Tennessee anyway. But then the Army decided to break the regiments down into battalions. Well, they had the 23rd. The 44th and what was the other? Well, the other 23rd Tank Battalion.
23rd, 43rd.
Yeah, and we were the 714th. We're excess baggage, so they kicked us out. Went down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. We didn't know it. It was a staging area to go overseas to be on an invasion of Europe, and we were in there when we were practicing that. And all of a sudden, we got orders that. We've got to report back to the 12th Armored Division. They're in Camp Barkley, Texas. And they pulled the 44th out and sent them to the South Pacific. So here we are in Fort Jackson. They load up. That was in, I think that was probably in March or latter part of January, somewhere along there. Go out to Abilene, Texas, and we're there until July or August when we went overseas. I think August, no, it was November. No, we went across the channel in November. Anyway, we wound up in Shanks, I think, about September. But why did they leave us in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, come right up north and join the 12th Armored there, and we'd have gone. But no, we had to go on the train out there and then come on the train clear back to Camp Shanks. Now, we went overseas on the SS Marine Raven. You've probably heard of that one before, haven't you?
But everyone has a story, so...
Well, this one here, the damn thing didn't have enough ballast in it, and it rocked all the time. Oh, we had George Gray was so seasick, the Navy come down and took him, and because he was going to die. But they took and shoved crackers down his throat and then poured tea down there to get something down on his stomach, see? Because it was dry heaving all the time. Well, I was down in the hole in this landing craft that we were on, and we hit a storm, and the tank broke loose down there. Man, I tell you, the Navy jumped down there, horns and sirens started flying. They chained that tank down, but I thought that tank hit the bulkhead once. I thought it hits it again, it's going out. So after that was over, I forgot what I was doing on my tank, went up by a hatch, and I thought, if I'm going to sink in this thing, I want to be looking at the sky. So but we got across, and we went up off France. That's where they unloaded us, and that's where we were headquartered until they decided where we were going to go into combat. But that landing barge hit a mine and sunk on its way back. So anyway, we wound up, we found out, first we were going to be in the 1st Army, and then, no, they didn't like that. So we convoyed across and joined the 7th Army. General Alexander Patch. And, you know, he was a mean general. I mean, he wouldn't even allow the press near him. Wouldn't give him billets or anything, so you never heard anything what he was doing over there. Well, him and Pat were right next to one another, see, and Pat was about Pat was as bad as him, too. Anyway, we wound up in the 7th Army, and we were 12th Armored, and we were committed, we landed in Bar-le-Duc in France, and from there we went into combat, and that was in November, I think it was. And that was was it November? Yeah, it was latter part of November. That was our first combat.
In the tank, what was your position in the tank? What was your crew position? Driver.
I was a driver for a while, but when the lieutenant got hit, I wound up in the turret for a while. And I didn't like that, because I was just a young kid, 22 years old, making decisions on, well, I turned 23, but making decisions on other people's lives, I didn't care for that. So I wanted him as a driver.
Now, tell me, you talked about going into combat. Were you there for the Battle of Herlisheim?
Was I? First of all, before we went to combat, we were getting ready to jump off on an attack, and Sergeant White's tank was right next to mine, and a mortar shell went in the turret, killed all of them, and Lieutenant Dulcie hollered, "White's been hit." So I threw up my hatch and jumped out of my tank and went over to see if anybody was alive left in the tank. You never want to look down after a shell hit down there, because you don't have time to cry or anything because you're going to combat. You cry later on when you got the time to. And bad thing about Sergeant White, he was married and had children at home. I had 4 fellows in the 714th that were real close friends of mine. Not one of them made it back. They all had families at home. Not one of them made it back. And that George Gray I was talking about that got sick, so seasick, Captain Clayton said, "George, after the war's over, I'm going to fly you home. You're not going home on a ship." You didn't have to worry, George got killed over there. So, then after that battles, we wound up, we were in reserve, and we were waiting for orders, and all of a sudden the orders came to convoy down to, what was the name of that town outside of, next from the waterworks, I think. I can't remember the town, what it was, but it was a town north there, and when we were convoying down there, it was raining and sleeting. Now, you got tanks there with steel tracks on them, and you're trying to hold that tank on the road, and you're coming through those foothills, those mountains, and I was one of the lead tanks at the time, and the Captain Clayton's Jeep was in front of me, and I finally told Head, I says, "Get out of my way, because I can't stop this tank once it starts sliding." And I said, I've got some more gray hairs watching about you than I did before. So he got out of the way, kept further, so on. And just going over there, going down through those mountains, we had to hit the side of the hill to slow the tank down, because we couldn't just stop it, because it kept sliding right on. So we got there, and we were sitting there, and we were waiting for orders to what was going to do. It seems to me we wound up there on a Sunday for some reason or other. And the next day we got orders to move up to the waterworks. And that was where they put a bridge across to get us the Zorn River there. And we were up there, and the next day they ordered us into Herlisheim. Little did we know, we were one division against 4 German divisions. And they shot the hell out of us, and they knocked our infantry down. I mean, I was supporting B Company one day, and I saw 5 of their tanks get knocked out right in front of me. And one happened to be Turner. I can't remember Turner's first name, but his turret went right off the tank, and I thought, well, he's dead. And all of a sudden he crawled out of the turret, and he climbed up on his tank to get his driver out. And when he did, his guy was dead. He's been cut with shrapnel in there. So never got him out, but George got out, but he was wounded, and I think he was captured. I'm not sure. Anyway, we got into Herlisheim and got just in a toehold of Herlisheim, and my lieutenant was in the command post. At the time they bombed, they threw mortar shells in there, and they got Colonel Thalen, and they got my captain had his guts ripped wide open, and must have been about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The Captain Clayton come by my tank, and he says, and George, and he told George and I, he said, "You guys are making a break at 8 o'clock tonight." He said, "We're got to get out of here because we're getting pounded, we're getting tore up like pieces." And he says, "We're going to put all the wounded we can put on the tanks, and you're going to make a break for it because we were cut off." So at 8 o'clock we pulled out, and there was five Shermans and 3 lights, I think. And we were loaded with wounded all over. You couldn't have fired our guns if we wanted to. Well, it's just we come out of Herlisheim, there was a tank burning, so we had to get off the road. Now, you don't know whether they're going to hit mines or not, so you're holding your breath. We got around that, got out. We get down to the waterworks, and I said to Jordan, I said, "Is that bridge on fire?" He says, "I think it is. Jump out, Acker, and check it." So I jumped out, run up on the bridge, and they started firing at me, and A Company started firing back. I don't mind telling you, it was 5 below, but I still peed my pants. I was so scared up there. And 2 jumps, I was back in the tank. I said, George, it's not burning. Get the hell across it. So we got across, and the A company was pulled up there with ambulances to take our wounded. And it was about 5 below zero at the time. And my brother-in-law was a doctor in England, and he was on the first wave on D-Day. He never went ashore, but he stayed on the boat to take care of the wounded, and they did that going back and forth across the channel for about 3 weeks. And he'd take fresh troops over and tend to the wounded coming back. But anyway, he'd give me a bottle of Irish whiskey. I'd had 2 others, but we down those. I had 1 stashed away in the tank, and I was so scared and so cold and everything. I got out that Irish whiskey, and I took a slug of it. The bottle left my hand. Never saw it again. But anyway, it was passed around real fast, and so after the wounded was unloaded, we were pulled back and went into reserve for a day to regroup and deciding what they were going to do. And that's when you probably have talked to the guys who were in the 43rd, when they were annihilated up there. We were shocked. I mean, that's when they finally realized the strength of the Germans. And we were ordered back in, and Colonel Bromley, he wouldn't take us in, and he was relieved of his command. Well, after the Battle of Hersheim, he was restored to his command when they found out what we were up against. We were 1 division up against 4 German divisions, and I mean they had more firepower, more troops, and they had cracked panzers and everything. So we were very proud of it. We took a beating, but they didn't get through. They bent us, but we didn't break. But we paid dearly. And what really saved us was the 100th, the 45th, 36th Old Texas Division. Now those buggers could really fight. I mean, and that's what saved the day for us up there, because we were fighting with them. And then after that the battle was won, we were sent down to Colmar to help de Gaulle rout the Germans out of Colmar, and we just established a bridgehead across the canal. And I thought, well, the troops infantry was going across that. So I got out of the tank to fill the canteens. And I was on the back of the tank with a 5-gallon water can for it. A sniper shot the 5-gallon water can right on my hands, and I drove off the tank, and I grabbed the phone in the back, and I said that we had a new lieutenant by then. It was Lieutenant Landau, and I said, Mac, there's a sniper down there along that canal. And the 8 says, I just picked him up. I see him. And he says, well, fire some 30 caliber down on him. So I was looking around the tank expecting the 30 caliber to go off, and the 8 hit the big gun button. The 96 millimeter went down, and all I saw was dirt and body parts flying. He hit him dead center with that. Shortly after that, orders came over, stop sniping with your 96 millimeter. So anyway, we were always getting called on that. I mean, Fred Fields had a hard time getting, because the guys, if they saw something, they'd use the big gun on them to make sure they got them. Anyway, went down to Colmar, and we went to de Gaulle down there. Now, I'm not a fan of de Gaulle's anyway. As far as I'm concerned, I'll put in the tape, he's a pompous old ass as far as I was concerned. He wouldn't listen to anybody. He thought he knew everything. Well, we got the Germans routed out of there. Now we're waiting for orders to where we're going to go. All of a sudden we got an order, so we're going up to see good old George Patton at Saarbrücken, up that country up there. So we convoyed up there, and what we're going to do here? So we're going to make a dash to the Rhine and break up the last pocket of Germans on the west side of the Rhine. And we went it in 3 days and 3 nights, I think. And that's the first time we'd ever did any fighting at night. But George would, if I had to go in combat again, I'd have gone with a guy like Patton. And a lot of people criticize him, but I learned a lot of new cuss words that I never knew before. And another thing, he hated the Russians. So he had cuss words for the Russians. And when he did get the chance to go to Berlin, they swung him over toward Czechoslovakia and south. They said you didn't want to be around him. I said he called everybody everything he could think of, and we were headed down towards Austria at the time, and we skirted Augsburg and wound up down there. But that's when we run into the camp at Landsberg. That was a German prison camp, You did in the Battle of the Bulge. You saw the guys on the hit that one prison camp. They were on the left flank, and we were on the right flank. We caught the ovens. They didn't catch the ovens. We caught the ovens. And Colonel Fields went into town and got all able-bodied citizens and children and everything that could dig, and they had to dig the graves and bury those people by hand. But they had bodies stacked up all over, and the stench. When we got into that camp, those people were crawling and people dragging to us, hugging us and kissing. They hadn't had baths and I don't know how many, and they thought we were God because they kept pointing to their mouth because there was Russians and there was Jewish, Russians, and Poles and all of them in there. And so I said to the lieutenant, I says, let's break out the food. He says, the medic said we'd kill them if we gave food. I said, these men are hungry. They're starving to death. We're going to feed them. So I said, we broke out the rations and we gave them cigarettes, candy, anything we had. Even gave them our whiskey, which we valued very highly. I could tell you a story about that one too. But we fed them, and after we were there for a day or so, we went back and joined the war and took off and went down south. When the war ended, I was on the Austrian-German border, not too far from Berchtesgaden. Then they pulled us back into occupation duty. Went to Augsburg, then they started breaking up in Ulm, Germany. That's when they started breaking up the armored divisions. And then I was chosen to go to Japan and be with the 2nd Division with a tank and go into Japan November the 5th, 1945 in the South Island, Japan. But while I was on the ship going home, Japan surrendered on the garden spot of the world. And so I got home and married my wife, and that's quite a story too. I knew her for 80 years. She was a kid next door. She was 5 and I was 6 when we met one another. And I was married to her for 63 and a half years. And little did I ever dream that I'd be married to my next door neighbor for that long. Anyway, she was a wonderful person and raised 2 daughters. And I came home and got out of the service, and they wanted to know if I was going to start the band up again. I said no. So I became a mortician field director. And I practiced that for 6 years. My wife hated it, so I gave it up, went back to college on the GI Bill, and became a salesman for Globe Industries. Worked for them for 33 years, and I retired in 83. I retired in 1984. I took a job from my friend who owned a window company over in Danville, Illinois. I'm 88 years old and still selling windows. But that story I was going to tell you about the booze. We were attacking, and Sergeant Phelps was leading the attack. And all of a sudden he started cussing like mad. We couldn't figure out. Junior said, Phelps, you in trouble? He kept calling. Phelps finally answered him. He said, Junior, you can't believe what happened. He said, a shell went across the back of my tank and took all the booze right off. Now, he's not worried about that. Some wise guy in our company, or in the battalion said, that's okay, Phelps, we got enough to feed you. And then, of course, I've talked to the schools in my area for over 16 years. And they told me in '92 to get out and start talking. Well, in going to college, I took public speaking, and it helped me a lot because I can talk to the kids. And I tell you, they talk about bad kids. I have yet to run into one. When I'm talking there, they're the politest kids in the world, and they want to help you all they can. And they ask some mighty good questions about the combat, about the prison camp, and this one little gal she raised her hand. I said, yes, miss, what is your question? She says, Mr. Acker, did you ever meet Hitler? I said, had I, the war would have ended right there. So I enjoy talking to the kids. I've talked to 5th graders, 8th graders, and high school kids. And I just got a beautiful letter from the school congratulating me on all the years I've been teaching the kids. And for our area, they're very interested in the wars. They teach it in the classes. In that book I showed you there, that I'm in that book there, 2001. But they put out that book about every year. Oh, that's about I'm still in Eureka, Illinois. They put me down here in 48 at 1958. My wife's buried there because she didn't want to be buried anyplace else. So that's where I'll be hanging out when I go.
I want to thank you for agreeing to talk to me.
Okay.
That was simply amazing, sir. Thank you so much.
Did I put enough about the war in there?
Oh, absolutely.